Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Imposter Syndrome workshop. Let's see, let's start with some introductions. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Henry Pham. I was in CKI for 5 years, CSU Fullerton all the way. I started off my young blood days as a family head, which best position in my opinion. But that's one thing. Afterwards, 17, 18, I was VPS. Afterwards, I was on the DLT for a little bit. I actually worked with Angela, who was hosting the workshop in the other door. And then spent my final year as a 5th year as club president for CSU Fullerton. It's a little funny. Yeah, I'm something of an imposter myself, but I'm sure everybody has a little bit of it there. I assume most of you are here because you're in some kind of a leadership position. And if you're not, then that's really good too. I think this is a really good start. Yeah, just to give a little extra background about myself for this. I was a mechanical engineer or I am a mechanical engineer, I guess. Spent 5 years. I was actually originally undeclared. Took me some time, but eventually I figured it out. And yeah, I'll be honest with you guys, I was not the best student. So I didn't care too much about the subject, but I did care a lot about learning, and I did end up graduating probably about like a 2.3 GPA, and didn't have any internship experience, nothing at all. But now, thanks to the connection of a certain Kwanian, who you actually all know a little bit, or I assume you know, but he's actually your citrus advisor, Scott Smith. So he actually got me onboarded at his company called Press Forge as a manufacturing engineer. And I'm sure you can all imagine that, you know, not having any experience, not being the best student, that I was thrust into a position that I was not very confident that I could do a good job in. And I went through a whole flurry of imposter syndrome. I actually started not even a year ago. I started in July, but it was a lot of doubt. I wasn't sure if I could do the job properly. I wasn't sure if I was qualified. I wasn't sure if I had what was needed. And I really felt like an actual imposter. And to top it off now, so now 11 months later into my position, I actually now supervise a team of engineers, and it's because my manager, Scott, was relocated and I was the next in the line of succession. So not only do I not have the experience, I don't have the qualifications, and I don't even really know what I'm doing. I've been thrust into a position where I need to know what I'm doing. So this is actually pretty new. This is actually pretty recent. So I'm actually pretty on the same boat. Well, I don't want to assume anybody here has imposter syndrome, but if you do, then I'm pretty square in with you. But there are a lot of things that I've gone throughout the years. I have been in CKI for a long time, and I personally know at least you four are in leadership positions. I don't know about you in the back, but I would assume you are, question mark?
I'm in spirit and social chair.
We love spirit and social chairs. Yes, good luck with everything. Anyways, so, okay, glad to know we've all been in leadership positions, and yeah, every single experience I've ever had, you know, nothing, at least for your very first position, nothing can ever really prepare you for what's to come in the year, because you don't really know what to expect going in. You can kind of know based off of your experiences as a first year, or if you are a first year in a board position, that's a whole nother issue. But it's a lot of, I'm sure it's a lot of self-doubt about yourself. And if it's not, then I have some things to say. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Okay, so I got a 4-step plan for you. The first step is we need to define imposter syndrome. As an avid imposter myself, when Jaslyn asked me to do the workshop, I was like, oh, I could probably do this. And so the first thing I did was Google imposter syndrome, and I started watching a bunch of TED Talks of how other people deal with imposter syndrome. I was like, what do people think? It's like, there was one main takeaway that I was able to get, and it's that nobody really understands it. And even all of us, myself included, don't really understand it. And everybody has a different way that they would approach handling imposter syndrome. There are a couple of key approaches that I was able to take away from all of my experiences. And in addition to watching all the TED Talks, but it comes down to pretty basic human instinct, which when you encounter imposter syndrome, you have 2 options: fight or flight. And we're gonna get into those a little bit later. But I'll talk a little bit about some common causes and some reasons why you might be feeling like you have somewhat snuck through the back doors of life, and that some of your qualifications might not have been as earned as you might think. But we'll kind of get into a little bit of that. Then we're gonna go into some action plans. We're gonna talk about some things you can do to combat it, whether you choose fight or flight. Then we'll just wrap it up a little bit. So it's pretty straightforward. So I want to clear up one thing first, is that I don't expect any of you to walk out of here with the most confidence in the world. I don't expect you to walk out of here and to be able to confidently say, I'm gonna conquer this position, that I deserve this, that I'm ready to take on the world. This is not what we're here for today. What we're here for today is to not only help yourself, but help those around you. I'm just one guy talking to one workshop, but you all have friends. And at some point in life, I'm sure some of you are already mentors too. But at some point in life, someone's gonna come up to you and they're gonna share their thoughts. And I just want to be able to give a little bit of insight. Maybe you'll take it home with you, maybe you won't. If not, that's okay. We're just here to either give you a little nudge in the right direction or to start your journey today. So that's what I'm here for today. I'm not expecting anything to change after this, but I do want to help give you guys a little nudge in the right direction. So let's talk about imposter syndrome. Of course, being an imposter, the very first thing I did was go on Wikipedia and look up the definition of imposter syndrome. And again, there is no clear one definition. I went through several pages, and I think Wikipedia kind of summed it up the best as possible. And imposter syndrome is a psychological occurrence in which an individual doubts their skills, their talents, or accomplishments, and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. That's a little bit of a handful. I like to just keep it a little bit more simple. And for the purpose of this workshop today, we're just gonna define imposter syndrome as a internalized fear. I don't want to use just the fear that what you've achieved and what you've done in life. Let me rephrase my thinking a little bit. I really want to make this just simple. But it's the fear that, your accomplishments are not your own, that you were either granted, you were placed somewhere or you got lucky or anything like that. That's just kind of like the general picture that we're here for today. And I want to help, if you are feeling these feelings, I want to help kind of identify it, because the first step to solving any problem is you need to know what it is. And we're going to try and get there today. So let's go to the next slide. I kind of already talked about this. I honestly forgot I had this slide here, so we're just going to move past that. But let's go into, let's start with some reasons why you might be feeling imposter syndrome, or why your friends might be feeling imposter syndrome. I summed it up to about 3 H's. First one is history. For people that have imposter syndrome, usually you'll see that they might have a history of either, whether it be family or friends, of constant critique. You might find yourself constantly trying to meet a goal or expectation. And if you have family or you have friends that put you in a position where you're being criticized a lot, this can generate feelings of imposter syndrome, because you just don't, it's harder to feel like you've achieved things when the bar keeps getting risen. That's one thing. Second thing is you yourself. You might be a person who holds themselves up to a very high standard. I found that most people in CPI, most people in leadership positions do hold themselves to a high standard, and in doing so, they sometimes can also hold other people to high standards. That's a whole thing of its own. But this can be a little bit of a double-edged sword. You do always want to be holding yourself to a high position, but you want to make sure that you're also validating your achievements, what you've done, your experiences. You want to be able to make sure that you're giving yourself proper credit for the things that you're doing, and try not to really set the bar so high, but it is good. And I am going to go into that a little bit later. And the last thing, not everybody has some tragic past. Not everybody has like family that are constantly criticizing them. Not everybody has high standards. But ultimately, the main reason that you have imposter syndrome is you're a human, and we are all humans, and we are always susceptible to self-doubt. We're susceptible to feeling insecure, and that's just a normal, natural part of life. And I do want to make it clear that I don't think syndrome is a good word to call it, because I don't think that having imposter syndrome is a sickness or some kind of an issue. It's a natural part of being a human, and I think it helps drive you further, and it helps give you that little bit of push to do more, to be more, to hold yourself to that high standard, but also still recognize that you're a human, you make mistakes sometimes, and we do get lucky sometimes. We do find ourselves in some favorable situations, and sometimes you might feel like you don't deserve being where you are, but you have to know that you took each step along the way to get there, and we very easily tend to overlook each small thing that we do to get towards that. So those are the main reasons, in my opinion. This is a very basic slide, by the way. There's not going to be an appendix at the end of all my sources. I'm going to be presenting this through my experiences and the experience I've seen through others in my time. And of course, Wikipedia and all that stuff, but that's unimportant. But so now we know where this comes from. So what can we do about it? Now this is going to go back into my original point. Most people, when they have imposter syndrome, they choose fight or they choose flight. It is a mix. It really kind of just depends who you are. And I don't think either approach is wrong. For people that choose flight, when they're encountering these things, they will tend to avoid going for higher positions that they think that they're qualified for. They might avoid speaking up, voicing their opinions, and this can be really dangerous. Not dangerous. This can lead you down a really wrong path. And while it is good sometimes to reserve your opinions and to make sure that you're on the right page, if you guys are anything like me, for those of you that know me, you can know that I can be pretty vocal about my opinions sometimes, but I don't ever say anything unless I'm 100% confident about the words that are coming out of my mouth, which is why you'll also notice that I speak in kind of gaps. And it's because I'm taking the time and I want to make sure that I'm conveying my message properly. And that's why flight can be a good tool when you're dealing with imposter syndrome, but you want to make sure that your voice is being heard and that you are taking chances. Ultimately, at the end of the day, none of us are actually technically qualified to do anything. You have to jump in first, learn the trade, learn how it works, and then only then can you say, I can do this. And that's how everyone starts. You know, you had to learn to walk before you ran, and that's just kind of the reality of the situation. You know, you can argue that, you know, I had a lot of experience doing this, so I think I can be a good fit for this. But, you know, for those of you that, what month is it right now? It's June. You're about 3 months into your leadership position. I'm sure there's a lot of things that you've encountered now that you weren't expecting when you came in. So you want to make sure that you're ready for these things. But I digress nonetheless. I think I actually had a slide for this. I don't remember. Oh, I put this together a long time ago, but fight or flight. Flight is mostly avoid. And then now I'm going to go into fight, which is kind of broken down into two main phases. Not phases, they're not broken into two, but you have two options if you're going to choose fight when you're dealing with imposter syndrome. So let's talk about the first one. The first thing you can do is accept your imposter syndrome. This is where it gets kind of weird because accepting it it's kind of like voluntarily putting yourself down and saying, hey, I got lucky and I don't know if I'm qualified to be here, but I'm going to try my best. And that's still a good mindset to have, but it can get a little tricky, and you're going to be dealing with a lot of instability throughout this time period. But you know, for all intents and purposes, let's assume that you're going for, you know, yeah, accepting imposter syndrome it's kind of like a two-part story. You do have to acknowledge that you're human. You do have to acknowledge that there are some things where you really did just get lucky hopping into, but you have to be able to also acknowledge the fact that you did the work. Half the battle, they say half the battle is showing up. And again, I don't want to assume anything about anyone in this room. So I'm trying not to like talk directly to you, but I'm trying to just present this as just kind of information, which is making this a little bit difficult. But that's the first part. The second part of the fight is embracing it. This to me is the only logical kind of solution when you're dealing with imposter syndrome. And what embracing imposter syndrome essentially means is you've passed the first part, which is accepting it. But by embracing imposter syndrome to me means that you want to use imposter syndrome as a weapon in your life. You want to use it to drive you forward. If you know anybody in life who is really, really confident and they don't think they have imposter syndrome at all, you'll usually find those people to be the most stagnant, because when you're in a leadership position, you always want to be having a growth mindset. You don't ever want to think that you've reached the top. You don't want to ever think that, there's nothing more for you to learn. And I think imposter syndrome is a really, really good tool to help you look up and look forward, make goals, and then start driving towards those goals. That's kind of the TLDR of Embrace. And again, all of these three approaches, neither of them are wrong. It's all just about finding your right balance. Sometimes you do need to choose all three at the same time. Not at the same time, but you do need to choose wisely when you're going through life. It really kind of just depends on why you're feeling the way you are. If you're feeling imposter syndrome because you just landed a new job, then you might want to decide to embrace. If you're feeling imposter syndrome because you just got your driver's license and people are counting on you to take them somewhere, you might want to avoid. You might want to make sure you get a little bit more practice before you start taking people into your own hands. So, and then, if you're just feeling like an imposter because of no particular reason, then this is a good time to accept. It's a good time to understand that these are normal things to feel as a human, and that it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're sick. It's not a syndrome. It's just a part of being who you are. And those are kind of like the main ways. Yeah, I really did watch a lot of videos, and a lot of people have different ideas about this. You might encounter people throughout your life where, to give some examples, there were some solutions. I watched like this one podcast. It was literally called like How to Overcome Imposter Syndrome. Listened, not watch. I listened to the podcast, and then you can tell that some people are like really like out of touch with things, because this podcaster was just saying, yeah, it's simple. Just don't let anybody's opinions get to you. It's like, if it were that simple to just, take someone's opinion and then just slide it out through the other ear, we'd be a much happier society. The ultimate reality is that you can't. If somebody's insulting you, it's kind of hard to not take it personally. If somebody is criticizing you, it's a little bit hard to just let it fly through the other ear, because there is always going to be a part of you that wants to accept that wants to think that maybe they might be a little bit right. But it's a lot of different approaches, and I gave you three today, but you might all have your own ways of handling imposter syndrome. And I honestly, I think the best three words to ever say when you have imposter syndrome are "I don't know," and that really kind of just eliminates majority of it. If we're talking about straight, like the definition of imposter, an imposter by definition is somebody who is in a role and they are actively trying to deceive you. And that's not really what imposter syndrome is about, right? Most of us have imposter syndrome because we've taken on a new role, we've started something new, and we're just feeling a little bit of self-doubt. But it doesn't mean that you're trying to deceive anybody. And the best way to do this is to use the words "I don't know." And this is me too. I'm not trying to tell any of you how to handle imposter syndrome. I'm not telling you what's the right answer, because the reality is I don't know. And you should never treat any subject really like there is any one answer. There are some subjects, but when you're dealing with a battle with yourself, or you're dealing with self-esteem, you're dealing with mental health, then a lot of the times that's the answer. I don't know. And there's nothing wrong with that. You have to accept that, there's some ambiguity in life. And to me, that's one of the most important things when you're handling imposter syndrome, and it's to not be an imposter. It's okay to feel the way that you're feeling, but it doesn't mean that you're deceiving anybody. So let's wrap this up now. I think I might. What time is this? What time is this over, Jasmine?
Actually, it's on my phone. Thank you. 4:30.
Ooh, perfect. Okay, just about 12 minutes left. So we will have some extra time after this. But let's wrap things up now. So we all know I'm an imposter, and I'm out here just trying my best today to help give you some new perspectives. It's totally possible that the words that are coming out of my mouth just sound like regular common sense to you. If you were enlightened today, then I'm glad. But yeah, I don't want to pretend to be anyone that I'm not. And so that's why I want to emphasize how important it is to say, I don't know. And yeah, I'm not going to act like I know how to deal with being an imposter. I can tell you that I know some ways that have helped me. And I just wanted to share that perspective with you today. Yeah, we know why and where it kind of comes from, whether it be from your history, who you are now, or whether you're just being a human. Some people just by their nature want to go for challenging positions, and you're gonna find yourself an having imposter syndrome by default, and that's okay. So so that's why you might have it. We've talked about how to deal with imposter syndrome. You can choose to embrace, you can choose to accept it, and you can also choose to avoid it. And again, I don't think there's any right answer to this. To me, I always try to choose embrace, because I want to be able to, I don't want to feel like it's controlling me. I want to be able to not accept, but embrace the feelings of self-doubt. And I want to use it, and I want to use it as a platform to keep moving forward, stepping up, taking the opportunities when I have to learn more, to grow, to allow myself to start letting the imposter in me kind of fade away with time. That's my approach. And I hope that today, if you are feeling imposter syndrome, that you at least kind of have an idea of what direction to head towards. Because again, it's not anything that can just be solved in one single day. But yeah, thank you. Any preguntas, questions? Okay. No questions? All right. We will end this here.